Greetings, everyone, and greetings in live from Remarkable House here in Indianapolis, Indiana. I'm a little bit disheveled this morning because my guest isn't here. I'm hoping she's okay. We had confirmation from her yesterday that she would be. So what I'm going to do is wait just a minute or two. It's not normally our process to go live when I haven't had a chance to sort of debrief with brief with our guest before they arrive, but we'll give it a minute or so and tell you that we're hoping to have a conversation. And if we don't today, we'll have it soon with Kelly Mackin, who wrote this great new book, Work, Life, Well Lived. And she's got an assessment that goes with it. And so there she is, I think. And welcome, Kelly, live. I was hoping that you'd be here a couple minutes earlier, but you're here. So we're just going to go live. Here's what we're going to do. Is I'm going to put you back in that green room. So I'll do the standard intro and we'll bring you back in and we'll just rock and roll. I was just telling everyone about your book and we'll get back to that in just a couple of minutes. So I'm going to put you right back where you just were. Just hang with me for about 2 minutes, maybe 3, and then we'll get started. Okay. So
okay, great. Sorry, I was probably getting in. It kept giving me the spinning wheel. So sorry.
Oh, that's okay. So everybody, now you know the inside baseball of what's going on this morning. We're glad that you're here. If you're here with us live, we are so glad. And of course, if you are joining us later, you might have wished that you could have zoomed through a couple minutes, but that's okay. We are so glad that you're here. And if you're here with us live, I hope that you'll say hello and tell us where you're from by hitting the comments wherever in whatever social platform you're in. That would be fantastic, because if you do that, I'll know where you're at. But more importantly than that, if you do that, we'll have a better conversation, because you'll have the chance to interact with Kelly and I and get your questions answered. Because think about it this way. If we were having a conversation around a table, Kelly and I, Kelly, who you'll meet in a second, and I and you were sitting around a table having a conversation, you would engage in it, right? If you had a question, you'd ask it. If you had a comment, you'd share it. If you had an idea, you would offer it. So why not do that here? Just because you're virtual doesn't mean you can't do that. Let your fingers do the walking and do that. We'll have a better conversation. Eventually, this will be a better podcast. You can see over my shoulder that this will, in fact, be eventually an episode of the Remarkable Leadership Podcast. So what I'm going to do now is the live read for that, and we'll bring Kelly in just a minute. And after I introduce her, as I get ready to introduce her. So, Marissa, this is for you in 3, 2, 1. There's a lot that's been written about work-life balance, and there's a variety of opinions and advice on the subject. Today, we will explore that idea, but through a different lens. The title of our guest's book sheds a light on that difference. Today, we are talking about work-life well lived. Welcome to another episode of the Remarkable Leadership Podcast, where we are helping leaders grow personally and professionally to lead more effectively and make a bigger positive difference for their teams, organizations, and the world. If you are listening to this podcast in the future, you could join us live. And why wouldn't you want to do that? Because then you can ask your questions, share your ideas, and get the information sooner. Like everybody wins if you do that. If you want to find out when those are happening and how you could join us for those, just join our Facebook or LinkedIn groups, which are just 2 of the places where we do these live casts. You can go to remarkablepodcast.com/LinkedIn or remarkablepodcast.com/Facebook to do that. Today's episode is brought to you by the second edition of our latest book, The Long Distance Leader, Revised Rules for Remarkable Remote and Hybrid Leadership. If you lead a team that is distributed in any way, this book will give you new skills, insights, and the confidence to lead more effectively in this new world of work. You can learn more and order your copy at remarkablepodcast.com/LDL for Long Distance Leader. And so with that, now I'm going to bring Kelly back on the stage. There she is. Let me introduce Kelly Mackin to you, and then we will dive in. She is the author, as I mentioned a minute ago, of Work, Life, Well Lived, The Motives Met Pathway to No BS Wellbeing at Work. And she is the co-founder and CEO of the Motives Met platform and Human Needs Assessment, which empowers people to create their best work life, and workplace. Her expertise spans quantitative research in human behavior to fostering psychological safety, from guiding individuals in mind management coaching to imparting the practice of mindfulness meditation, both inside and outside of work. As a researcher, she gains insights into significant parts of our lives, like our values, stress, and emotions, to develop frameworks to better understand the world and ourselves so we can make positive change. Kelly, welcome. Glad to have you here.
Thank you. So excited to be here and chat with you today.
So, as I said, we're going to talk about this book here in just a minute. If I can get it to not look too bad in the light. Um, but I want to start with a little bit more about your journey. In the book, you talk about your journey, and I don't really want to go through all of that, but I really do want to understand sort of how, and help others understand how you got to thinking about this whole idea, which I'm going to say in general is work-life balance, although we're going to dive in more specifically than that. Like, how did you end up doing this? You did tell your mother when you were a kid that you're eventually going to write a book, which you now have done. But tell us a little bit about the journey and a little bit about what led you to this particular book.
Sure. Well, the journey really does stem all the way back from growing up and seeing my mom go through extreme ill-being at work. She was in a very toxic work environment, and I looked up to my mom so much. And it was so disheartening to witness her go from at one point thriving at work to then complete misery at work when her company got bought out and everything changed. And unfortunately, I found myself on a similar path, also ending up in a toxic work environment where my mental, emotional, and physical health took a serious nosedive. And it took me really hitting some ugly lows before I woke up and got clarity and said, this isn't okay. This isn't the way work should be. And that really set me on a path to dive deeper into well-being in my life overall. And I developed such a passion for it that then I started helping other people develop well-being in and outside of work in a multitude of different ways. So as you had kind of mentioned, my background is in research and coaching and mindfulness. And I found that a lot of the clients I was working with, their struggles were related to their work life, whether it was how to be the best leader they want to be, or dealing with toxic and work environments or difficult coworkers. And then it was at about 2017 where, the work well-being movement was becoming a thing. And my mom and I were thrilled. We were like, oh my God, people are using work and well-being in the same sentence. Like, this was not a thing not that long ago. So we were really pumped about that. But then we went, why is stuff still so bad? Why is ill-being still leading the way, and things like stress and burnout and unhappiness so high and retention so low? Something is not working well here. And our research curiosities led us to kind of go, well, what the heck even is work well-being? Like, we're talking about it, but we don't seem to have real clarity around it. So we kind of looked to the experts and secondary research and what the world was saying. And we went, oh my gosh, it's so overwhelming and completely contradicts itself, because you'll have like one social media influencer telling you it's all about work-life balance. But then a different one's like, no, screw work-life balance. It's all about the hustle and growing to reach your potential. Leaders are told, oh, your team wants purpose and belonging. And other leaders are told, no, it's all about appreciation. And research is all over the place too, saying employees want growth most. No, they want flexibility most. No, they want connection. So you go, well, what are we supposed to do with all this? We're kind of drowning in information, but starving for real wisdom. And that's what set us on our path to really dive into our own research to get to the truth.
Which leads me, I mean, you started, we've been using this phrase well-being, and you actually used the phrase that you use in the book a lot, ill-being, earlier. So let's just start here, since well-being at work is in the subtitle of the book. What's your definition of it?
The definition that we have found through a lot of research over many years is that well-being at work is when people's most important motives are met. And I can, of course, dive into exactly what that means. But having that shared meaning and mindset with the people we work with the people that we lead, is what puts us all in a much more empowered position to create a work world where being human is really possible.
We'll get to that shared piece and that leadership piece and the rest of the team piece, but I want to sort of stay with ourselves for a bit, whichever role people want to be thinking about. Like most people here likely wear a leader hat at least some of the time, but we're also working. We're not just leading, right? So, whatever hat as you are listening or watching you're wearing, that's one I want you to stay with. We'll come back to sort of the larger picture before we're done. But I want you to, you've said that, and I sort of labeled this on the front end as about work-life balance. And certainly as I looked at the book before I read it, and when I made the decision, hey, we'll have Kelly on, that was where I categorized this. And as you've said, you're being a little more specific about that. So let's talk about that. Tell us a little bit more about, or what's different about your approach to all of this than a lot of the other stuff that's been written.
Well, what we uncovered through the data is that there are 28 psychological, emotional, and social needs that are at the heart of what work well-being is all about. And we call these 28 human needs motives. And we've developed this framework that makes it easy to grasp these 28 human needs. And they fall into 10 overarching buckets or motive domains. So for example, in the freedom domain, there's the autonomy, flexibility, and free expression motives. In the balance domain, there's work-life harmony and a balanced pace. But growth is a motive, belonging, self-esteem, prestige, growth. But what our data also showed is that what matters most to you, Kevin, for you to thrive at work, to be, super happy and healthy, is going to be different than what I need most. So all of these motives matter. They just don't matter equally to each person or each team. So well-being is really personal. And the way the world tends to approach it is more of a one size fits all. These are the top things you should want. This is the answer to work happiness. There are so many articles on the internet. This is the secret. If you get these 2 or 3 things, this is the answer. And our data kind of shows that's all wrong. So it's about really uncovering what matters most to you in this season, knowing that your motives are going to change over time. They don't really change one day to the next. But as you have big milestones in your work life, if you think back 10 years ago, probably what you needed most to thrive is going to be a little bit different than what you need today.
Yeah, I think go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, and I was just going to say that, some people, when they see our framework, are like, great, I love all of those. I want all of those 28 motives to be thriving and a 10 out of 10. But we say we'll be the bearer of bad news and say there's kind of this ugly truth of work well-being as well, that it's not really possible to have all these 28 needs thriving at one time. And
well, 28 of anything is like impossible, right?
Yes, exactly.
There's not 28 food groups. There's
Right.
not, we just name it. Like that's not possible, right? So where you head here in the assessment, and we can talk a little bit more about the assessment, but where you head to is to help us figure out what our top 5 of the 28 are and work from there, correct?
Yes. Because if everything's a priority, nothing's a priority, right? So it's like, let's start with getting those top motives healthy. And we also give you your secondary motives as well, kind of your support motives. But that's what really puts you in that power position, because we say, there is no set hierarchy of needs. It's about figuring out what your needs hierarchy is. And it's not always really obvious because we all have blind spots. We're all hustling, just trying to get through our day. We're usually not stopping and really going, what does matter most? And hey, I have some really tough decisions, or I'm trying to decide what job to take next, or where I want to go next in my company. How am I going to figure that out? And by knowing your top motives, that really gives you a compass and shines a spotlight in a way that just puts you in a much more powerful position in your work life.
So, yeah. So one of the things that you talk about, and we, I wanted to, I'm kind of going backward now a little bit because I think one of the things that I found most interesting in the book was you had these 10 things that you called the dream killers. So first of all, what do you mean by that? And then I'd like you to just pick one, and maybe it's one that directly connects to what you've just been talking about, or wherever you want to go with it, because I think getting to this idea of well-being at work, however we want to personally define it, is hard, right? And it's complex. And so You have these dream killers, which I don't mean to be a downer to our conversation, but I think it's important for us to like recognize that. So
Yeah.
pick one or maybe two that you might mention, and then let's talk about what can we do with those things.
Sure. Yeah, no, it's really important to understand what are those obstacles, because that's what allows us to get to where we want to go. I mean, there's this great quote from Marcus Aurelius that says, what stands in the way becomes the way. So I made that kind of the start of the book to say, let's look at these 10 dream killers, and then we can go, this is how we're going to solve for them. And the way that we kind of think about it at Motives Met is we have what we call the attainable dream of a work life well lived, kind of coming back to that idea of ambitious yet realistic. And there are 10 of these kind of big obstacles. One of them being we tend to take a passive and reactive approach to work wellness instead of a proactive and preventative one. But prevention is always better than cure. So we're not always being mindful of these motives at work. We're not always showing up with intention to safeguard them for ourselves and other people. And so that's one big roadblock that gets in the way. Another dream killer I'll just quickly touch on is that we don't talk about what matters most to us and others at work. If we're not communicating about this stuff, that's going to be a big problem when we're trying to meet these motives. So those are just two examples.
So obviously, and we are talking with Kelly Mackin, the author of the new book, The Work Life Well Lived. Obviously, you would say, well, hey, everyone on the team should take the assessment, and I can understand the value in that. And yet, if we haven't, or if someone's listening to this, and maybe that's what they're going to do eventually, but right now, what can people do? I actually want to read something from the book, and then have you talk about this, because we're getting now at this idea of this isn't just about ourselves, but as you just said a second ago, sharing it with others. So here's what you said in the book. A sacred truth we must rally around is that well-being is co-created. It happens when individuals, work peers, and leaders show up for themselves and each other in meaningful ways to keep motives healthy. I want to get to the keep motives healthy part in a second, but even if we haven't done the assessment, based on what you've already shared with us, or while we're waiting for our copy of the book to arrive, what could we be doing as a team leader or as a member of the team to get at some of that co-creation you're talking about? Because so often we think about all this as being something that we need to do for us. You're suggesting something bigger than that.
Yes, because we're so interdependent and interwoven at work that we all have such a ripple effect on one another. If you think about any of the 28 motives, whether it's flexibility or autonomy or shared culture or passion, the degree that any of those motives are going to be strong for any given person is going to be affected by everybody. So if we want the work world that we dream of, if we want the thriving teams, if we want to live our best work life, we need one another. And we have to show up for ourselves, but we have to show up for one another. And we kind of have this saying that not everybody has to give a damn, in the sense that we all have to love each other all the time, but we do have to have the shared mindset that everybody deserves to have their motives healthy at work, and that we play a role in that. And I don't need to be the reason someone doesn't feel they don't belong, or to be the one to stifle someone's growth, or, dull someone's passion at work. So it's kind of showing up with that intention and that mindset that makes a huge difference in our relationships at work.
And so how can we as leaders lead that?
Mm. Well, there's quite a few things, but one is that going to be that internal reflection, because as a leader, you have a huge impact on the degree that these motives are going to be strong and protected. So just looking at each of the 28 and getting really honest with yourself, which of these do you dismiss? Which of these do you not pay attention to? Which of these might be a little bit weaker on the team? A really important concept I talk about in the book is embracing motive diversity, because we tend to kind of think what we think is most important is what others should think is most important. And we don't even necessarily mean to do this, but we all hold these biases. Certain motives can be put on a pedestal and other ones can be judged or dismissed. And so, kind of getting honest with where you might be lacking in this mode of diversity area as a leader is going to be really helpful. But I would say one of the second things you could do that is so powerful is ask good questions. It is great to ask someone on your team, hey, do you love it here? Do you hate it here? Are you happy? Do you have well-being? That's great. And our research actually showed 33% of people said in the last year, their boss or manager never had that conversation with them. 31% said only once. That's what our research found. So that's a great starter. But if you ask better questions, you get better answers. So asking people on the team, hey, when it comes to work-life harmony, are you more of an integrator or a separator? And how does that manifest for you? And let's talk about it. Or, hey, you know that big company picnic we do every year? Is that actually fun? Do you find that fun? If we were going to have a budget for how we could have fun as a team, fun's a motive, like what would that look like? So having really good conversations about these 28 motives is going to put you in such an empowered position as a leader. So if you could literally look at each of them and go, I'm going to come up with one question for each and ask my team about this in our next meeting, and what you will uncover will shock, awe, surprise, and inform you.
You know, one of the observations that I had as I was reviewing the book and thinking about our conversation is that not only do we need to recognize the totality of the 28 motives, and to recognize that different people have different ones of these will float to the top for different people, certainly, but that our organizational culture or even our team culture could have an impact here as well. Meaning that there may be some of these that are valued more by the culture, but organizationally over time, which in some cases could be good because there could be folks who are drawn to that, or people who never thought that was possible that now find that motive more enticing to them than it ever did before. And yet, if that's an opposite or in tension with what someone's motives are, like you said, unintentionally downplaying one or something else. It was just an observation that I made, that this isn't just about leaders recognizing that in others on the team or helping them find it, but how the culture plays into it. You want to comment on that at all?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, when we talk about a people first culture, it's like, again, as a researcher, I go, what does that mean? How do we develop a definition around that? And really, people first means putting people's human needs first. And our data shows when you need satisfaction, that's when you have job satisfaction. So if you want this amazing culture that people don't want to leave, it really is looking at each of these 28 needs and going, are these doing well? You know, am I creating the space for this need to thrive at work? And again, as a leader, you only have so much influence. But your job is to get other people, again, to come into this idea of co-creation and say, hey, guys, you want a thriving culture? Guess what? It's not just on me. It's on you. How are you showing up? Are you vocalizing when your needs aren't met? How are you supporting each other in your motives? And that goes a long way with leaders, because it's tough to build amazing cultures. And so often leaders are told it's all on you and it's all your responsibility. And we actually say it's not. You have a huge, of course, impact on it. But the best thing you can do is actually empower other people to create it with you, because that's the only way you really get to a place where all of the things that matter most at work are doing really, really well.
Yeah. So, we're talking about 28 motives. We're talking about a team of 7 people, 8 people, 12 people, whatever, right? And everyone's are different. And this is complex, for sure. And then, as you've already hinted, that motives that any of us might hold could change for any variety of reasons. So we're layering complexity on complexity here, and yet your model helps us to dissect that a little bit. I understand. My question is, why is it that they change? Because if I'm the leader and I have gotten some handle on where people are and what those motives are, most important motives are for them. What are some of the things that might lead our individual motives to change? So if I'm a leader, I can be thinking and aware of how I stay on this journey with my team.
Sure. If you have, let's say, a kind of a big switch in your job responsibilities, like let's say you're kind of taking on a new role on the team, a month or two into that, you could be at a very different place than you were, 4 months prior. Or, even in your personal life, if someone has a kid or they have a really big issue in their family, that can impact their needs. But then we find some motives are tied very closely to people's values, and some of those don't change quite as much. Like, for example, autonomy and flexibility are two of my top motives. And I have taken the assessment 4 times. Once a year, we say, is it just a good gut check-in and whether you take the assessment or not, whether you just sit there and really reflect and go, okay, what's most important to me? Flexibility and autonomy are just tied to who I am. I'm like a freedom kind of person. I think it goes back to just my history of being in such a toxic workplace. So those just kind of have stayed the same, while my other top 3 motives have kind of changed year to year.
Gotcha. So tell us a little bit more about the assessment specifically. Obviously, there's a link to it in the book. And unfortunately, I did not get the chance to get that done before our conversation this morning. But tell us a little bit more about the assessment and how they can learn more about it.
So with the book, we give you a free code to take the assessment. And that was so important to me that we did that. And readers really love it because you're able to take this personal journey of, again, like I'm thinking about this roadmap I take you through in the book, but through the lens of my top 5 motives. So you get a free code. It takes about 15 minutes to take the assessment, and then you automatically get your top 5 motives. And we give you this amazing guide to help you meet those motives as well. So we give you a summary of each of the motives. My favorite part of the report you get are these awesome motive reflection questions that get you thinking about your needs in a way you probably haven't thought about them before. Like, future success is one of my top motives. One of the questions I love is, hey, how do you need to show up as your future self today to get the future that you want tomorrow? Like, how are you going to bridge that gap? So it gives you really good questions, tips, different ways to kind of check in on your motive health. But one of the coolest parts that people really love is the section that walks you through how to develop a well-being action plan, because that's kind of the whole point of this, is to have your own personal action plan of how you're going to strengthen and protect and honor your top 5 motives, and develop what we call your motive story, because we all have a story behind why these needs are so important to us, and which ones maybe stress us out, and which ones we feel we do really well, and where we need support. And when we share these stories with other people, that's how we connect as human. That's how they can help support us to strengthen our motives. So developing your own motive story is really cool, and hearing people's motive stories is like one of my favorite things ever. So that's a really cool part of the report.
Before we start to wrap up, we've been talking with Kelly Mackin about her new book, Work Life Well Lived: The Motives Met Pathway to No BS Well-Being at Work. And so I'm going to shift the focus and ask a couple of questions, Kelly, that I ask all of our guests. And one of them, I usually prep you if we have the chance to chat before we go live, which we didn't do. So when we get to the second question, like if you don't have an immediate answer, it's okay. Don't worry about it. And there's no pressure. Okay. But here's the first one. Should be easy. The first one. Are you ready? What do you do for fun, Kelly?
Oh, so many things. So I live in San Diego. I play competitive beach volleyball. My pup also loves the beach. So we're always at the beach for a sunrise run or a sunset. And I'm also an avid boxer and reader. So I love to read, and I definitely do that quite a bit as well.
Well, that goes to the next question. What are you reading right now, Kelly?
Oh, I am reading Ben Hardy's new book, 10X is Easier Than 2X. So I love all of Ben Hardy's books. He's an awesome psychologist. He's written 9 books. I actually had the chance to meet him a few years ago. And all of his books I would highly recommend. Be Your Future Self Now is another favorite of his.
We will put a link to that in the show notes, as well as a link, of course, to Kelly's book. But before we go, Kelly, where do you want to point people? What are the where can people learn more about your work? Where can people get a copy of the book? All of those things. I'll hold up the book while you do that.
Our website is motivesmet.com, so you can check out. We have lots of great stuff on there, research, different reports, articles. You can sign up for our newsletter where we send out a lot of great stuff. And we also have information about the assessment on there as well. I'm very active on LinkedIn as well as Instagram, so you can find me there as well.
There you have it. So before we go, everybody, and before I thank Kelly officially for being here, I'll ask you all the question I ask you every single episode. Kelly was talking about the importance of powerful questions. I believe this is one of the most powerful questions. And as you've been with us now for about 30 minutes, the question is, now what? What are you going to do as a result of this? Like, what action are you going to take? Maybe you've been challenged to ask better questions. Maybe you've been challenged to think about how other people's motives are different than our own and stop making an unintentional assumption about that. Maybe you want to learn a little bit more about these dream killers and how you can deal with those. Like, I don't know what it is for you, but what I do know is that if you don't ask that question, and if you don't answer that question, then the value that you got out of the last 30 minutes will be greatly reduced compared to if you take some action on what you got. So, Kelly, thanks again for being here. It was a pleasure to have you. Thanks for sharing your wisdom and your time with us today.
Thank you so much. I really enjoyed our conversation. This was great.
So everybody, if you enjoyed this, you'll want to be back next week. And if you found this useful, guess what? Someone else you know will as well. So invite them to join you on the next episode or this episode of the Remarkable Leadership Podcast. And wherever you're listening to this, make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss any future episodes. We'll be back next week, as always, with another episode of the Remarkable Leadership Podcast. Thanks, everybody.